Hey everyone. Today's video is a bit different from my usual Rails and AI demos. Instead, I'll be sharing the most valuable tips and tricks I've learned over the last 6 months building applications exclusively with AI, both my own and for clients of my software consultancy, Optimal Cadence. I will also be throwing in my strong but weakly held opinions, and I want to hear yours in the comments below. A quick plug. I'm currently working on a deep dive course where I'll build the actual course hosting platform the course is hosted on using every technique I cover here. Meta, right? Honestly, this is the most useful video I've made so far, and if you agree, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps me keep the channel going. A few quick thoughts before we dive in. First, I'll be focusing on tool-agnostic fundamentals. While I have favorite LLMs, frameworks, and tools, the core ideas work anywhere. The landscape will change, but the fundamentals will endure. 2. Generative AI using models to write code isn't just another tool. It is a whole new way of building software. Master it, and you'll thrive through this irreversible industry shift. 3. Developer roles are evolving. You still need strong technical skills, but think of yourself as a building architect. Understand how things are built, then let AI handle the framing. Your job is to spot, diagnose, and guide, hopefully without picking up a hammer too often. Finally, I can't record a video like this without talking about vibe coding. If you haven't heard, vibe coding is a term coined by OpenAI founder Andre Karpathy. Vibe coding is defined as an approach to producing software by depending on artificial intelligence where a person describes a problem in a few sentences as a prompt to a large language model tuned for coding. The LLM generates software based on the description, shifting programmers' roles from manual coding to guiding, testing, and refining the AI-generated source code. Vibe coding is claimed by its advocates to allow even amateur programmers to produce software without the extensive training and skills required for software engineering. I can honestly say that when I'm in the groove, I feel the vibe, but there's way more to it than that. All right, let's get into these AI-powered development tactics. First of all, we'll start with context. You've probably heard that context is king. Some developers think AI only nails code completions and basic snippets, but based on my experience, it can do a lot more if you feed it the right context. Here are 6 tips to keep your context concise and effective. Number 1, document rules and include them in your context on every session. You'll want to document some general rules and some project-specific rules. I use the cursor editor, which allows me to create rules that are automatically added to new sessions. But again, the tooling isn't as important as the concept. You can easily add the rules at the beginning of each new AI session. Here's some examples of some general rules. First, write code that is easy to test with automated testing tools. Consider and propose refactoring opportunities when you see things like dry violations or excessively long or non-cohesive methods or classes. Finally, ask clarifying questions when additional information will improve the outcome. And here are some examples of project-specific rules. Project technologies, Ruby 3.3.4, Rails 8.0.2, SQLite, Hotwire, Turbo and Stimulus, import maps, no NPM, Flowbyte 3.1.2, and Tailwind 4. Prefer turbo frames and turbo streams over full page refreshes in order to create a modern, reactive, spa-like user experience. Use Stimulus for all page-level JavaScript interactions. And finally, when generating Rails enums, use the 2-argument syntax introduced in 7.1. And again, you can see that these are specific to the technologies that I'm using, but it really doesn't matter. This last rule is just something that I've noticed almost all of the models fail to do, is to write the correct syntax for enums. So adding it to the rules ensures that I don't have to deal with that time and time again. The second tip is to provide documentation on less familiar technologies. I use a tool I built called Contextually, which uses AI to optimize documentation provided as a file upload or as a web page. This reduces the size of the documentation without losing the important details and example code. Perfect for keeping a lean but effective context. This can be done however, directly using AI chat tools. Tip number 3, provide project level requirements. I typically provide an executive summary of the project and user stories or a product design specification. Once again, I typically use AI to help me iterate on and generate these artifacts from a high-level project description. Rule number 4, don't overdo it. Adding too much to the context is almost worse than not enough. This is a guaranteed way to cause hallucinations or runaway coding or refactoring, both of which can be avoided with proper context management and prompting. Tip number 5, prime the context. The first question I always ask when I open a new context window is, what do you know about this project? This works well without adding additional context when using certain tools and models. For example, Cursor with Claude 3.5 Sonnet will generally find the rules files, the gem file in Ruby on Rails, and other important files and generate a great response. If you don't get the response you are looking for, try adding specific files to the context and ask the question again. Believe it or not, this is a surprisingly valuable technique, and I'll cover it a little bit more in the prompt section of this video. The response AI gives you to this question is now in the context and equally important, written in its own words. Think about that. The sixth and final context tip is to make use of RAG and MCP. These are both advanced topics that deserve their own discussion and research. If you haven't already watched it, you should check out my video on RAG. I'll put a link in the description below. If you aren't familiar with these concepts, I would recommend you do a bit of research. They're very powerful tools, especially when you're working on projects using unfamiliar or proprietary frameworks and libraries. So those are my 6 tips on managing context. Next, we're going to be discussing prompting. Prompting is also king. Along with context management, the quality of your prompts will determine if AI will be a useful assistant or a brilliant, highly productive pair programming partner. Prompting tip number 1, be the expert guide, observer, and auditor. Modern coding models are amazing and fast, but they don't know anything about your project, your coding style, or your preferences. Some of them even know good code from bad code, believe it or not, but that doesn't mean they're going to write good code unless you know how to ask for it. Here are some examples, 2 different prompts essentially asking for the same thing. Prompt number 1, build a course management system including all of the models, controllers, and views. I would like for you to add automated tests for the models and controllers. Prompt number 2, you are an expert in Ruby on Rails development with a strong understanding of the best coding practices and testing standards. You will be building a course management system with some unique features as outlined in the executive summary and user stories. I would like for you to review the project files and documentation and propose the first few development tasks we should tackle in order to build this incrementally while allowing for testing, validation, and documentation along the way. Please ask clarifying questions that will help you with this task. Well, it took me a couple minutes longer to write that second prompt. The first prompt is almost guaranteed to send you down a long, frustrating journey full of bug fixing, uninstalling libraries you didn't ask for, and reverting code. Let's break down and discuss that second prompt. First, I gave it a narrow role. In other words, I put a hat on it. You are an expert in Ruby on Rails development with a strong understanding of the best coding practices and testing standards. Next, I gave it a context summary. We will be building a course management system with some unique features as outlined in the executive summary and user stories. Next, I gave it a well-defined task and didn't ask for code yet. I don't want to have it prematurely generating files. I would like for you to review the project files and documentation and propose the first few development tasks we should tackle in order to build this incrementally while allowing for testing, validation, and documentation along the way. And finally, I implied that this is more of a discussion than a command. Please ask any clarifying questions that will help you with this task. This very prompt resulted in a thoughtful conversation from which I agreed to 2 or 3 proposed feature enhancements. The context was primed, and this session went very well, maintaining a collaborative and conversational tone and great results for several hours. The second prompt-related tip is don't write code most of the time. When the AI gets stuck, it's often because it encountered a challenging problem. I have found myself tempted to take over writing the code, and sometimes I do. When I do, I let the model know which files I changed in order to resolve the issue. The model will typically respond with something like, "Good catch. It looks like the code was using syntax that is not compatible with newer versions of Rails." So why did I bother showing it the changes I made? Well, this is now in the context for the remainder of the session. The model is more careful about the syntax it generates. Quite often it will bring it up later in the conversation when it uses newer syntax or features. Go figure. More often than not, though, I don't fix the code myself. I figure out what might be wrong and I ask the model to fix it. For example, I think the problem is the way you are declaring that enum. It is not compatible with Rails+8, which is the version we are using on this project. Remember? And the model will say something like, "Good catch. You are correct. This syntax will not work in Rails+8. I'll make the necessary changes." Well, the enum example is pretty trivial. I can promise you that it works with bigger challenges too. Just last week, Claude and I had to craft our own active storage strategy for action text attachments without any prior knowledge of how it works under the covers. We were both stumped, so I did the research and prompted Claude, who validated my findings and crafted a pretty elegant solution along with developer documentation and automated tests. So there you have it, my top tips for context and prompt management. Now I'm going to throw in a few bonus tips. The first are related to source code management. My tips for source code management are: number 1, commit often. Number 2, branch often. And number 3, revert when a solution doesn't fix the problem unless you like digging deep holes. Let the model know you reverted the code and why so that it can pick up the reverted files. Source code management is critical when you're working with AI. The reason being that sometimes models hallucinate, they make changes that you didn't ask for and break code. They'll also add libraries that you don't want or need, and you need to be able to get back to a good working state. There have been plenty of projects along my learning journey where I just pretty much abandoned them because I didn't even know how far go back in order to get working code. That is a great segue into my next section, which is testing and documentation. Of course, you won't know that AI broke the code unless you have automated tests or you do manual testing, which is quite time consuming. So AI is great at writing automated tests. Using Claude and Cursor, I am able to let it write, run, and fix tests without intervention. Oftentimes, it's a great lunch break activity. AI is also great at writing documentation. I ask it to generate documentation about some of the interesting aspects of the application that might be difficult for future developers to reason about. For example, Claude and I, created a pub/sub system that allows cross-module asynchronous event handling on a complex multi-module system. Once complete, Claude generated documentation that will help future developers and future Claudes add new publishers and subscribers. It's pretty nifty. And that is it for this video. I hope you found this information useful. Please give me your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe if you want more of it. I hope to see you in the next one.